Okay, welcome back, and we are beginning chapter 11 of the Rathus Introductory Psychology textbook. And in this chapter, we're going to be exploring stress, health, and how do we cope with stress, and how does that all kind of fit in together. This chapter could be also called health psychology if you wanted to. It's a sort of new burgeoning branch of psychology, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, but in a few slides, but that addresses how we can take care of ourselves both physically and mentally for better mental and physical health. So let's go ahead and move on. So by the end of this chapter, you'll be able to define what stress is and also be able to understand where stress comes from. You'll also be able to describe and talk about things that moderate stress, things that there are certain factors that there's no getting around stress. Like, we're all going to experience stress, but whether we experience stress as a challenge or as a threat oftentimes will be determined by these moderators that we're going to discuss, like self-efficacy and humor, et cetera, et cetera. We'll also look at what stress does to the body. Unfortunately, just a preview, things to come, stress is very destructive to the body, very harmful to the body physically and mentally, and we'll talk about why. Then we'll also look at the relationship between psychology and health. Really, we're looking at the mix between mind and body, and the health of one definitely affects the health of the other. So this is kind of a preview to our chapter on mental health, I think, which is actually the next chapter, chapter 12. So chapters 11, 12, and 13 really work really well together because we're talking about mind-body connection in 11. We're talking specifically about mental illness in 12, and then we're talking about how do we treat mental illness in 13. And so they connect really well together. All right, so just a quick review from chapter 10. If you don't mind, in a moment you'll need to pause your video and maybe write some thoughts down, or just maybe talk out loud or think out loud if you'd like. What are the three structures that construct our personality according to Sigmund Freud? Go ahead and pause your video and come back. Okay, welcome back. You should have wrote something down about the id, the ego, and the superego, ideally. I mean, you could have wrote about the conscious, preconscious, and subconscious if you wanted to, that's fine. But I was really looking more specifically for id, ego, and superego. The id is that I want it now. The ego is, hey, we have a reality we have to adhere to. Maybe I want things, but maybe sometimes I have to wait, and that's okay. And the superego is kind of like the ref in the middle of the between these two opposing forces, trying to keep things at peace, so to speak. Okay, these are the truth or fiction questions that you'll see, or statements that you'll see throughout the chapter. Go ahead and pause your video and maybe check through these. Maybe go ahead and mark the ones you think are true, mark the ones you think are false, and we'll come back to them as we proceed. You can go ahead and pause the video if you'd like. All right, welcome back. So again, as I mentioned earlier, stress is something that is inevitable. Like, we all will experience stress. From the moment you open your eyes and get out of bed, you are experiencing some sort of demand that is placed upon you. Whether it's, hey, I've got to go to work. Hey, I've got to go to class. Hey, I've just got to get up and literally take care of myself, like make my bed, or all the little things that we have to do throughout our day are considered stressors. However, how we perceive these stressors is a totally different thing. If we think about them as, okay, this isn't a big deal. This is what I've got to do to be an adult. This is what I've got to do to be a college student. This is what I've got to do. This is just a challenge that I have to meet every day, and it's no big deal. That's considered kind of good stress or healthful stress, or otherwise known as eustress. That's not so bad. That's okay. And that's kind of most of the stress we encounter is sort of that way. However, if we perceive this as maybe in a negative way, that it's threatening, oh my gosh, I've got to get up and go to class today, I'm unprepared, and I think we have a test and I didn't study, and I've got to go to work and I'm going to be late because of traffic and blah, 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 and I'm just freaking out about this. That's when it becomes distressful, and that's when it becomes it's unhealthful stress. And again, really the big point we're also going to hit on is, stress and especially even distress in small amounts isn't that big of a deal. But stress over long, intense periods of time is what is damaging to the body, both physically and mentally. And so we're going to talk a lot about distress, and especially prolonged distress or intense distress. So, but keep that in mind. There is good and bad stress. It's not all equal. You're probably a college student watching this video right now, so you can probably attest to this, but the research shows that stress, at least reported by college freshmen, or at least feeling overwhelmed, which is another way of saying stressed, is sort of on the rise. I mean, if we look at 1985, not all that long ago, 30-something years ago, and then we look in 2015, we see a pretty moderate increase, going from about a little under 20% to a little over 30%. So, there's probably a lot to that. The cost of education has gone up, but also I think the pressure of having a college degree has also gone up as well. So keep that in mind. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do now is maybe come up with your own example of something that would be considered eustress or good stress, and something that would be distressful or bad stress, and try to come up with something that's personal to you, something eustress that you view as a challenge. It is a stressor, meaning it's something that you have to do, or it's a demand placed upon you, but you enjoy it. It's a challenge, but you enjoy it, versus a distressful moment. Something that maybe you don't find pleasant, maybe something that causes you maybe stress or anxiety or something like that. Maybe write your own example down and come back. Okay, welcome back. Since I'm not here to check your own example, I'll trust that you made your own, but make sure you understand the difference between the two. One is good stress, one is bad stress. One prolonged of both can be bad. I mean, but there is such a thing as good stress, and which leads us to our first truth or fiction question. Some stress is good for us. What do you think? Pause the video and come back. Welcome back. It's in fact true. Some stress is good. We literally would not get out of our beds in the morning. We wouldn't wake up in the morning if we didn't have some degree of stress. So we need to be motivated. Stress is another way of saying motivation. Even when it's bad stress, sometimes that's very motivating. Like, oh crap, I have a paper due tonight and I've only written like one page and it's 20 pages and I've got to turn it in tonight. That's very stressful, but it's also very motivating. Some people may view that as a challenge and go, okay, I can do this. Other people may say, oh crap, never mind, I'm giving up. I'll email the professor and ask for an extension instead. It all depends on how you perceive the events. So there's a whole new branch of psychology called health psychology that literally looks at the relationship between psychological factors and how that relates to our physical health. Basically, the connection between stress and physical health. Stress is a mental event, but has far-reaching physical ramifications on the body, which we'll talk about later. So they're specifically looking at how stress, behavior patterns, and attitudes how they're related to illness, how they're related to physical illnesses, and also kind of conversely on the positive side, how do people cope with stress? Because again, we're all surrounded by it. Nobody in this world is not experiencing stress to some degree. Granted, we all have different stressors, but we're all experiencing stress. So how do we deal with it? How do some people deal with it effectively while others don't? So there's this whole idea of mind-body connection, specifically looking at how stress affects pathogens, specifically how stress affects the immune system. Heads up, when we are stressed, especially when we're chronically stressed, our immune system just does not work the same. We're much more prone to illnesses. We're more likely to be exposed as pathogens. All right, and some other things that health psychologists are looking at is also kind of why people decide to take care of themselves, or why they seeking treatment health-wise, like going to the doctor or going to a physical therapist or a chiropractor or a counselor, whoever, kind of taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, why some people do, why some people don't, and also looking specifically at interventions that can be done to modify and contribute to overall better health, physical and mental health. So these are some of the things that health psychologists are interested in. And so one of the things that health psychologists have identified is breaking up stress into specific categories. So I think we're going to look at, I think it's 3 big categories. So we're looking at first at daily hassles. Daily hassles are just things that literally you have to do almost every day. So again, waking up and making your bed, or getting up and brushing your teeth and taking a shower, going to your job, all the kind of household health things. Maybe you got to take medication every day. Maybe you got to go pick up kids from daycare. Maybe you got to pay bills, maybe all the little things that you worry about day to day. Those are daily hassles. And for the most part, they're small. But again, when we do them every single day, they do begin to add up. If you're kind of chronically stressed about that long drive to work and having to pick up your kid from daycare and all these little things, like, it does add up. And it can, even no individual stressor by itself is so bad, but when they pile together, it can be pretty bad, or it can feel like it's getting bad. Also, there are life changes, which are considered stressors, even though positive ones. Even positive life changes can be very stressful. I mean, think about the transition from high school to college, especially if you're living on your own for the first time. That can be very stressful. And these are also a little more unpredictable. Life changes are more unpredictable because they don't occur at regular intervals. I mean, it's not, I mean, granted, like, oh, your birthday happens every year, but you don't go to like college, you don't transition to a new school every year. You don't get married every year. Ideally, you don't, some people, even people who have lots of children, don't have children every year, or you don't lose a loved one every year, hopefully not, or every month. But what I'm saying is that sometimes these things are surprising to us. And sort of we can see in terms of this comes directly from some research you can see cited at the bottom. It talks about how each of these sort of life-changing events can be measured on a scale, and the higher up the higher score would indicate more stress. So if you lost a spouse, for example, that would probably be one of the most stressful events that can happen to you as an individual. Beginning college as another one, especially again if you're moving out of your parents' home and into a dorm or into an apartment for the first time. That can be very stressful. Unwanted pregnancy, failing a class, or failing out of school. Even graduating college can be stressful. I mean, I know some of you are already thinking about that now, but you've then got to decide, hey, do I want to go to another school, like a four-year college or grad school, or do I want to find a job? That can be stressful. Academic success, I mean, can be stressful, kind of tying back into graduating college. Going on vacation can be stressful. I mean, many of us plan these wonderful, amazing vacations, and then we end up stressing out half the time. All right, truth or fiction, I know we just talked about it, but academic success and vacations can be stressful. Pause the video, what do you think? Welcome back. It is in fact true. Even exciting things, even good things that we plan and have fun and enjoy can be stressful. I mean, I've been to Europe multiple times, and every time I go, it's very enjoyable, but it's also very stressful, especially the flying in the airport, getting to the airport and flying and all that stuff is very stressful. But luckily, it's all worth it. Same with academic success. It's all worth it. So all of these things have been known to... Again, they are how people cope with these things. The daily hassles and the big life changes can have a tremendous impact on our mood, which in turn is very predictive of our health. If we can stay and have a positive attitude, a positive mood and emotions during times of stress, and we can cope with these things effectively, then we're probably going to predict less health problems. But if we're really freaking out and we're stressing out about all these changes that are happening and all the things that we have to do in our daily lives, then then we're probably more likely to get sick. We're more likely to predict things, health problems, both physically and mentally. And one of the biggest sources of stress to all of us, even when we have enough of it, is money. I mean, even people who have money still are probably concerned about, okay, well, I could probably use more money. And people who don't have a lot of money are definitely thinking the same thing. So money is a big source of stress for us all, and I think that's a lot of reasons why school is so stressful for us all. We spend a lot of money to go to school. We're hoping to make a lot of money from going to school, so there's a lot of stress tied there. Here are some physical warning signs that you might be experiencing stress. If you're ever curious, I'm sure you are able to identify yourself, but you might experience headaches. You can feel it in your stomach. That's kind of how I personally experience stress, is in my stomach big time. Other people, will feel dry or kind of that cotton mouth feeling. Some people get a rapid heartbeat and even feeling pains in their chest. It affects our sleep. It also affects our ability to stay kind of alert and awake. So, I mean, you can read through this whole list if you'd like, but these are all different signs that, you might need to be aware of, especially a college student. You are probably maybe a little more prone to stress right now. So be aware of kind of what's going on with your body, because it's a pretty good warning sign. Another thing that stresses us out is conflict. Conflict, kind of when we are being pulled in two different way. We're getting pulled in two different directions or more in some cases, and there's different types of conflict, of course, but each conflict is kind of stressful in their own ways. And psychologists have identified these different types. Like approach is kind of when we're being pulled by two different forces that are both good options. So for example, if you were applying to college, a 4-year institution, and you were applying to say like, UCLA and Cal Berkeley or something, you had the grades, you had this test scores to get into like 2 really good schools, and you're kind of cool with either one. Or in-state, let's say you apply to OU and OSU, and you're happy with both. That's what I did with my grad student when I applied for doc schools. I applied to OU and OSU. And I was really happy with getting into both. I actually went to OU, obviously, if I haven't mentioned that, but that was sort of an approach conflict. Avoidance is when you have 2 bad choices. It's kind of rock in a hard place. Maybe it's, maybe your job, it's, I can take this promotion, but if I take the promotion, then I'm not going to get to see my family as much because I'll be traveling, I'll be working more. But if I don't take the promotion, then the money we're going to miss out on is too much. It's kind of this isn't, this kind of approach avoidance. Maybe that's kind of going back to the college example. Maybe you have a school you really want to go to, you're really excited for, but you have this fallback school that you're kind of like, I really don't want to go to, but it's the safety school that I'm like, hey, if nothing else works, I'll go there, but I really ideally don't want to. Or jobs, it's like, hey, this is a job I really want, and there's this job I know I can get, but I really don't want. And then multiple approach avoidance is kind of all of these again, but more added layers. So it could be approach, like there's more than 2 schools, or however you want to think about it, but it's a lot going on. Stress, according to some, stems from our thoughts. There's a whole branch of psychology, specifically in therapy, therapeutic psychology, counseling psychology, that looks at how our thoughts contribute to stress and anxiety, and specifically those who follow in the footsteps of Albert Ellis, who kind of had this ABC sort of order of events of how stress develops. We have sort of an activating event, which is the stressor. We have our beliefs, which is this something that's a challenge or is it a threat? And then we have the consequences of those beliefs. And those who see things as a threat are probably more likely to catastrophize those activating events, those stressors. And of course, this would lead to anxiety or depression and impair their ability to actually cope with the stressors. So your mindset and how you view stress matters so much. It can't be understated enough. Here are some examples of irrational beliefs that people might have in terms of like things that stress them out. For one, the idea that it is necessary to have love and approval almost all the time from people who are important to you. Number 5, the idea that if something is or may be dangerous or fearsome, we should be terribly upset and endlessly obsess about it. Number 11, the idea that human happiness can be achieved by inertia and inaction. So again, anyways, you can go through this list, but these are all kind of complex belief systems that some people have rationally or irrationally, and the idea is this is what's causing the distress, is holding these irrational beliefs. Okay, truth or fiction, searching for social approval or perfection is an excellent way of making yourself miserable. What do you think, true or false? Pause the video. It's in fact true. That is one of the easiest ways. It's okay to care about what other people think about you to some extent, but if you're always searching for their approval or you're trying to be perfect, unless your name is Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, that's just not going to happen. So you're probably going to make yourself more miserable than you would otherwise. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about for this part of the video is type A versus type B people. A very broad way to categorize people in terms of their personalities. Type A people, according to this type of stress research, type A people are very, very go. They're very driven. They're competitive, and sometimes they're very even hostile or aggressive in terms of their competitiveness. They're always looking to improve. They're also very stressed out because they're, in this constant sort of battle for self-improvement and for competition and how motivated they are. And these types of people are sort of more predictive of distress, and they're also predictive of some of the health problems that we're going to talk about later. Whereas type B individuals tend to be more relaxed. They're not quite as competitive, or maybe they're more focused on things like the quality of life, and they tend to be a little more patient with themselves and other people. So in that sense, they don't get quite as stressed out, and they're not as prone to some of the illnesses and some of the maladies that we're going to talk about in part 2 of chapter 11. So with that in mind, I think we're going to stop here. We'll pick up on this truth or fiction question. Type A people achieve more than type B people, but they're less satisfied with themselves. So we'll stop here. We'll come back and address this one. Actually, let's finish up here. Pause the video, and what do you think? Type A people achieve more than type B, but they're less satisfied with themselves. That is true. It is in fact true. So we'll stop here, and we'll look at moderators of stress. All right, take care.